Even from my country upbringings and small schools, it was planted in my heart, and it was just an accepted thing that evolution was the truth. And then when I came into the things of God and really plug into Jesus and wanting to serve Him, and become a student of His Word, a preacher of His Word, there is just this little thing in us that when we watch the Discovery Channel, we believe in evolution because that's what they're saying. And then when we read our scriptures or we watch television that's biblical or Bible preaching or any of that, well, we believe the Bible. The Bible's true. We'd all say, yes, the Bible is true. It's inerrant. And yet, the two are at loggerheads against one another. And so you have to make a choice. Either you believe the Bible and the whole Bible. If you reject some of the Bible, then what parts of it then are not true? And what about your salvation and all the other things that we hold dear? Maybe some of that's not true as well. And so what it does is plants in the heart of a believer these little doubts. Now, I realize that until I started teaching on some of these things, maybe you hadn't thought about them, but I am just one that likes to take the Scripture and just simply interpret it in the way that it was written. And so we've talked about the fact that when he says the evening and the morning were the first day and the evening and the morning were the second day and all of that he is putting stipulations that this is a 24-hour period. Now, if you have not thought about these issues, sometimes some of these things that I am throwing out may sound strange because you certainly were not taught some of these things in school. But you must understand that I cannot prove any of the things that I'm saying scientifically, that it is an interpretation from a standpoint of belief in God. So God, in verse 1, we talked about this, that God created the heavens and the earth. And it says the earth was without form and void. And I personally do not believe in the gap theory where there is a gap between Genesis 1:1 and 1:2, that there were maybe millions of years between the two. I don't believe that that's the case. I believe that Genesis 1 and 2 are just part of day one. That in Genesis 1, where it says God created the heavens and the earth, He was simply putting together the building blocks with which He would use then to form it more fully as He goes on through the creation week. Verse 3. Then God said, "Let there be light." And there was light, and God saw the light, that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness He called night. So the evening and the morning were the first day. Now, I'll remind you, and we talked about this as well, but it's just been a few weeks since we talked about this, so let us just bring us all up to speed. God did the creating thing by speaking. And His word, His spoken word, was so powerful that not only did it make happen what He said, but also that the things that were created by His saying continue to this day. And so in Hebrews 1, verse 1 or 2, whichever one it was there, when it says all things are held together by His powerful word, or the word of His power, I understand that to mean that when He spoke, not only did the various things come into being, but they continue to this day because of the power of His spoken word. And what that means to you and me, just on a practical level, He spoke this to someone who in turn then wrote it down for our benefit. And so the power, there is power in this. Power to change your life. Power that God backs up to make things right for you in the face of negative circumstances, in the face of darkness, as it were. So I just remind you that God is the creator, but He did it by speaking. All right? Such power. Such power. And it's curious to me that when He spoke this and He created light, this is on day one, and He didn't create the sun, moon, and stars until day 4. And because I am a natural man living in a natural body, that's curious to me because I have a hard time thinking, how can there be light without some kind of source? You know, we have a tendency to think, well, when we see light, something's causing it, something natural is causing it. But in this case, the sun, which we get in our solar system, we get light, hadn't been created yet. And yet God said, let there be light, and it says there was light, and he said, this is good. Light without a source, but did have a source, didn't it? It was God. 1 John. Keep your finger in Genesis 1. We'll come right back, but I want you to see this. 1 John. Verse 5 says, this is the message which we have heard from him and declare to you, that God is light, and in him is no darkness at all. If we say that we have fellowship with him and walk in darkness, we lie and do not practice the truth. It says here, God is light. Now think about that for a second. Is this saying then that the essence of who God is then is light? I mean, light like we see it. You follow what I'm trying to say here so weakly? that it's saying that God is light. Well, in the context, when you look at it here, it is not saying that, I don't think, that God is like natural light. It's saying that when it says God is light, he is illumination. He is holiness. He is truth. He is the revelation of truth. All right? You see that? And so then darkness would be the opposite of that. Darkness means lack of illumination, lack of holiness or sinfulness or wickedness. But if this is figurative language, then the figurative must be based on something that is real. You follow? And there are other scriptures I jotted down. When it talks about the brightness of his glory, that he dwells in unapproachable light. When Paul was on the road to Damascus and was struck down, he was blinded by seeing the Lord in his glory as he appeared to him. So there is some kind of attachment or some kind of part of being in the presence of God without the filters, if you were, that he throws up to us in the natural so that we're not consumed. But God, it says he dwells in unapproachable light. Light so thick, so dense, if you will, that we, in our humanness, cannot approach it. Is that what happened here on day 1? Is that what it's talking about when it talks about God said, let there be light, and he just took a portion of who he is and let it shine into this natural thing that he is creating? Well, I don't know. But I think light itself, in the spectrum as we understand it, natural light, is different than his supernatural light. That's just an opinion of mine. But on that day, without any source other than his creative speaking, light came to be. And I believe that it was a creation, just like all the rest of this, out of the heart and mind of God. He says, I want it to be this way. And so he created the fact of light, even though there was no source yet except his spoken word. Verse 6, then God said, let there be a firmament. Everybody say firmament. Firmament. Don't look at the margins. What does that mean? Somebody tell me. Don't look. It's an expanse. That's not a word I use every day. I'm not sure I've ever used it before today. Firmament. There is a firmament between me and Teresa. It means there's an expanse in between us. That's all it means. It's just an expanse. All right? Firmament. So can get some weird ideas if we don't know what that means, and there have been some, but I'm not going to go off on the weird ideas. But it just simply means there's an expanse. It can be space in between us. All right? So God said, let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. Thus God made the expanse and divided the waters which were under the expanse from the waters which were above the expanse, and it was so. And God called the expanse heaven. So the evening and the morning were the second day. Now, isn't that clear? You get a lot out of those verses. We'll just move on now. No. There have been various interpretations. And firmament simply means expanse. And there is a disappointing... I love the New King James. I really like to use it, but I'm disappointed in the way that they handled this word heaven. They capitalize it. Now let me ask you, did God create heaven on this first day? Well, that's the way it would seem to read, that He created heaven with a capital H. Wouldn't that be heaven? Now you understand, that was a translator's prerogative to do that. They made a decision, at least on this New King James in my Bible. Now I know that they did not do it on NIV and stuff, but I'm disappointed in that. All right. Now, the three ways that heaven can be interpreted or used in the Scripture. And let me just read one. You don't have to turn over there, but I'll tell you, I'm reading out of Jeremiah chapter 4. And so when you read in the Bible where it says heaven, it'll be talking about one of these three ways. Jeremiah 4:25. It says, I beheld, indeed there was no man, and all the birds of the heavens had fled. The birds of the heavens. So I just chose that. I'm not trying to make a point here, but in the Scripture you'll find these three places, and one is what we would call the sky, where the birds fly. Up above us, but not down, it's from the surface of the earth up through the atmosphere where the birds fly. All right, it calls it the heavens. All right, and that's scriptural. It's the atmosphere. Here in Genesis 1 is another one in verse 14. We already read it. Let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to divide the day from the night, etc. What was that expanse? It was the celestial, sun, moon, stars. So what's above our atmosphere then? What we would call space and all that's out there. It's vast. It's huge. Then let's look at another one. Hebrews chapter 9. Hebrews chapter 9. Verse 24 says, For Christ has not entered the holy places made with hands, which are copies of the true, but into heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God for us. Where did Jesus go when He ascended? To go before the Father? Where was that? What do we call it? Heaven, we might call it heaven with a capital H, right? It's where God dwells. Right? And that's what we tend to think of when we think of heaven. And so when we read this with a capital H in it, we think, well, this is is this talking about heaven? And I say to you, no. It's not talking about heaven. It's talking about heaven in terms of our atmosphere, all right? It's part of the creation. It's not talking about Him creating where He lives. I submit that He was already there. Is there such a thing as I'll use these words, supernatural or spiritual realm? Where is it? Is there such a thing, or are there such things as angels and demons? Yes. Okay, I'm assuming there are no demons here this morning. They wouldn't have appreciated what we were doing, that's for sure. But I just ask you, you believe that there are angels here right now? What do you mean by here? Are they natural? Now we know that they're spiritual. I mean, I'm playing with you here, but we start thinking about these things and what it really means. So does that mean, do they exist in a realm apart from what we understand, the created realm, the natural realm that we can see and touch and feel, hear, smell, and all of that? They exist evidently in a place that is coexistent with this one as far as I say that, but I believe that space is a created thing as well. So anything that we consider natural would be not supernatural, I guess. I'll say it that way. But we would say that here this morning, you with your angel, are there angels here to facilitate the worship and the preaching of the Word and the reading of the Word and prayer and all that they do to serve the saints? They would be here, yet we can't see them. They're invisible. And either, I've always thought of it like they're in a plane that's just different from our natural, created plane that we live is just different. Now Jesus, Paul, in writing about us in the resurrection, we're going to have resurrected bodies, but it calls them spiritual bodies. And we have a tendency to think in natural terms. When we think of body, you can feel it. It's flesh. I can see this and feel it. I can see you and your body. And it says there'll be a spiritual body. Jesus, patterned after the one that Jesus had after He resurrected. Now, understand, Jesus is God before and after His resurrection. And I understand that, but it still indicates in the Scripture that we'll have a resurrected body like unto His. So, looking at His, what did He do? Did He interact with the natural world, the created world? Yeah, He did. He could eat. He could do the things that He did before, except He could do a few other special little things like appear and disappear. Just stuff to help you think during the week, a little something to throw out to you and let you know. So is heaven then, this third heaven that Paul talked about where God lives, is that natural or supernatural? I see it as a supernatural. God is spirit. And in some kind of way, in the end, it is going to be like measurable, like the New Jerusalem coming down out of heaven and all of that. So, these are mysteries to me. And they came to me this morning when I was thinking about it, and I said, I don't have answers for that. I don't know what this all means. And so we have some things to learn when we step out of this body, don't we? We have some things to learn. Well, that's heaven. Let's talk about the heavens here. All right, now what is this dividing the waters from the waters and in the expanses? And what is all of that? Let me give you a picture. There is the sky that is just space. It's got air in it, but it's space. It's empty. And so think of it as like a sky sandwich. Down below is water as we know it. Just water, all right, on the surface. Then there's the expanse in the middle of the sandwich, just sky. And then there's water above. That's what it says. He separated the water from the waters, and there's an expanse in between. And so what is commonly accepted among creationists is that there was a water canopy, and that's what it's talking about. Now, there are different interpretations on what that water canopy can be. Water like we know it, and then space, and then water like we know it. Some have interpreted it to be ice crystals like Saturn's rings. All right. Others have interpreted it to be clouds. One of the moons of Saturn has a canopy. Venus itself has a cloud canopy. There are those that believe that it's cloud just around the whole earth, a cloud. All right, cloud is water. I mean, a form of water, is it not? You understand? All right. But there are problems with some of those in that if God created the stars to be able to be seen and the sun to shine upon the earth, if it's clouds, that's not going to happen. And so in my reading, I would say is the best one is water vapor. Water vapor is almost invisible and yet can contain a huge amount of water. And what it would have provided, if this is in case, now let me make sure that we're on the same, because when I first heard these things, I thought, this is crazy. Who came up with this? But when you read it and you think about it in terms like this, it makes sense. So you've got this unfinished earth in whatever shape it was in. I assume it's a ball, but it's kind of a watery mix. It's not been, the land part has not been separated out yet. So it's just the basic building blocks of creation, if you will, a watery mix. And then there's space above it, and then there is this canopy. And if it is water vapor, then it's nearly invisible. So, I'm looking at a section, it would be like this, and then around the whole earth. What it would have created was like a greenhouse effect, but it would have been a positive and good greenhouse effect. It would have protected the earth from radiation and the sun's rays that are harmful. And that is one suggestion is why people and animals live so long before the flood. It was after the flood that people started living much shorter lives. But before the flood, I mean, they lived a long time, almost 1,000 years. And it's because the damaging rays of the sun did not get through this water canopy. And it provided a lot of benefits so that Eden was even better and the earth was even better than what we can think about because we do not have a water canopy like that. Now let me just read some of these things. There would have been no winds, no storms, no deserts, year-round growing season, lush vegetation. It would have shielded the harmful effects of the sun. There would have been a higher atmospheric pressure so that when you breathe, you would have got a whole lot more oxygen than you do now. And that's why the animals grew larger. And where did all the water from the flood come from? Until the flood, there had not been rain. We'll get to that later. But earth as we know it, if all the clouds and the humidity that's in the atmosphere in the earth as we know it to now, if everything dumped and rained on the earth, they estimate that it would have only given us a puddle of 1 inch. Never mind enough to kill everybody and to cover the mountains. And so that had to come from somewhere, and perhaps it was this water canopy. God did some kind of thing that made it condense and fall on the earth, and hence the flood. Water canopy. Is that new to some of you? Then God said, let the waters under the heavens be gathered together in one place and let the dry land appear. So he took the waters as waters like we know it and pulled them aside and then had the dry land appear, all right? God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters he called seas, and God saw that it was good. Then God said, let the earth bring forth grass, the herb that yields seed, and the fruit trees that yields fruit according to its kind, whose seed is in itself and on the earth, and it was so. And the earth brought forth grass, the herb that yields seed according to its kind, the tree that yields fruit, whose seed is in itself according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. So the evening and the morning were the third day. So the waters were a kind of a shoreless ocean. God separated out the land, and he spoke into being the plants. And the land or the earth that he created was such that it had the nutrients to make plants thrive. And with the greenhouse effect of the canopy, assuming that that was the case, then it was a veritable garden. He created it with the ability to recreate itself through seeds. You note that God did not plant seeds. He created things functionally mature. They had the appearance of age even when they were minutes old. And in fact, He created everything, even the animals, functionally mature. Fruit trees had fruit. Animals were created with the ability to run, fly, swim, and to reproduce. Adam was created full grown, not as a baby who had a history of growing up and interacting with nature. He was created fully functional, fully mature. And so he had no wear and tear. He didn't have scars, cavities, no worn teeth, no cholesterol, and no calcification of the bones. He would have been quite a guy, quite a specimen. And He prepared the land for the animals who were then to come. And there is a phrase that is repeated over and over in here, and I believe that He put this in here to counter evolution. And He said this, that it was after its kind. Plants after their kind, animals after their kind, that no reptiles would evolve into birds, no monkeys into men. Okay? Each after its kind, and it would stay that way. They need to quit. Next week, or the next time I teach on this, sometimes the Lord intervenes and wants me to teach something else. He created the animals, right? What about those pesky dinosaurs? What do you do with that? How does that fit? If you're curious, the next time we teach on that, we'll teach on that.